And good afternoon. My name's Hillary Ritt. I'm with the Department for Libraries and Archives in Kentucky, and I'm sitting in for Andrea Lewandowski, who is with the State Library in New Jersey. She is our normal facilitator for these meetings, but it's my pleasure today to be able to assist her and also introduce you to our presenter, Emily Durkin. Emily is the Public Policy Manager at the American Library Association's Public Policy and Advocacy Office. And today she's going to be talking with us about formerly incarcerated individuals and reentry. So reintegrating into society. Just so you know, too, our next meeting will be in December, and briefly share with you about what that will be about. It's job resource connection, ongoing support for job seekers. The presenters will be Kristen Linscott and Heather Torres from the Plano Public Library. Job seekers come to the library with a variety of backgrounds, interests, and needs. So hear about the ongoing programming that Plano Public Library in Texas designed to address a variety of job search and career development goals for their diverse workforce. They combine a dedicated staff team with partner presenters and to serve their community and make impactful connections. So that's next month. It will be the second Tuesday of December. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Emily. And thank you all so much for being here. If you do want to, I know it's just a few of us, but if you want to put your name in the chat in library, that will be fine too. Thank you all.
Thanks, Hillary. I'm gonna try to start getting myself together so I can try to share my slides, except I might not be because looks like there's a little bit of let's see if I can get this to work.
And Emily, if we have questions, you want us to put them in the chat or wait until the end?
Yeah. Sure. I think we can be pretty informal here. So
Okay.
if you just please feel free to come off mute, and just just ask as we go.
Okay.
Just start, like I said, start my slides. Can everybody see that? Is that okay?
Looks
Good. Okay,
great.
perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Hillary. I'm really excited to be here today. Like I said, like Hillary said, actually, my name is Emily Durkin, and I serve as the Public Policy Manager in ALA's Public Policy and Advocacy Office based in Washington, D.C. And ALA's Public Policy and Advocacy Office works to secure policies that support libraries, follows and influences legislation, policy, and regulatory issues of importance to the library field, and ensures that libraries are consistently involved in the legislative and policy decision-making process. And one area of that policy is prison libraries, which I'm excited to talk to you today about the role prison libraries play in workforce development and economic opportunity, and share practical tips and policy recommendations from ALA's report that was released this summer titled Investing in Prison Libraries, a Cost-Effective Path to Safer Communities and Second Chances. So before we go into a little bit more about the report and the work of prison libraries, I want to talk a little bit about the state of incarceration in the United States and talk about barriers that incarcerated people face during reentry. So the United States incarcerates more than 1.25 million people in state and federal prison, spending tens of billions of dollars annually each year, an estimated $182 billion annually on corrections. In addition to this 1.25 million people, additionally, there's roughly, of that total, there's over 600,000 people held in local jail, and more than 600,000 people are released from prison each year. Despite this, nearly 70% of those released are rearrested within 3 years. And this cycle of recidivism is both costly and damaging to families and communities. By investing in prison libraries and education, we can meaningfully reduce recidivism while enhancing both public safety and human dignity. Upon release, many formerly incarcerated individuals face significant barriers to reintegration, such as low literacy, lack of employment, and limited community connections. Prison libraries help proactively address these challenges by equipping people with skills and knowledge necessary for successful reentry. High recidivism means repeated community harm and criminal justice costs. On average, the annual cost of incarceration fee for a person incarcerated at the federal level in a federal bureau facility or a non-bureau facility in 2023 was $44,000, or roughly a little over $120 each day. And studies show that access to books and education programs in prisons can dramatically reduce recidivism, and that every dollar spent on education yields $5 in reduced incarceration costs during the first 3 years post-release. And prison libraries contribute to the education of the incarcerated. These figures don't cover the human cost when people are deemed not worthy of investing in, and it behooves us to offer opportunity to incarcerated people, and prison libraries are a low-cost way to do that. So before I move on, are there any kind of questions on what I've just shared? Any other kind of questions? Like for those who are just hopping in, we're keeping this pretty informal, so please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that come up throughout the rest of the presentation. So looking at kind of how did we get here? So I'll touch on this a little bit later in the paper, but ALA's Public Policy and Advocacy Office worked on some legislation around providing additional financial assistance to prison libraries. It's much needed financial assistance. And so part of our education, awareness, and campaign around that legislation and the needs around prison libraries, we released this report titled Investing in Prison Libraries: A Cost-Effective Path to Safer Communities and Second Chances. The paper explores the essential role prison libraries play in lowering recidivism by better preparing incarcerated people for their release, and why further investments in prison libraries are essential to reducing the social and economic impact of incarceration. And like I said, the paper builds on, we'll touch on it a little bit later towards the end, but the paper builds on our work with the Prison Libraries Act, and is designed to increase awareness and education about prison libraries, specifically for a bipartisan policymaker audience, philanthropists, advocates, and those in the carceral profession. As what we found is that a lot of folks aren't aware of the work outside of the library field, right? Aren't aware of the work that prison libraries do day in day out to support incarcerated people, but also the work that public libraries do in tandem with prison libraries to support reentry. So the paper kind of gives an overview about incarceration in the United States, talks about the work that prison libraries do, the challenges that prison libraries face, and why further investments are essential. What you'll see on the screen is there's a QR code that leads directly to the paper itself. And so importantly, prison libraries reach not just people who elect to participate in formal health or education programs, right? But the entire prison population to provide resources and skills development. When prison libraries are well-resourced and well-staffed, they're able to work in tandem with existing education programs to provide that robust support that aids in reentry. And the Federal Bureau of Prisons has identified interventions in prisons that help promote success after release. And this includes addressing mental health and substance abuse, education gaps and job skills, supporting family connections, and equipping people with practical reentry information and resources. And out of all of those things that I just listed, prison libraries do a good number of those things. They support and provide programs that do several of those things. And so this is why, prison libraries reduce recidivism. They're able to already do those kind of programmatic supports and resource development, and that with additional funding and additional resources, it truly could have a larger impact on reducing those economic and social costs. And so diving a little bit into talking a little bit about some of the programs and services that prison libraries offer. Prison libraries enhance literacy and learning. One example is that at the Alameda County Juvenile Hall Library, librarians work to boost literacy and a love for learning among incarcerated teenagers. A goal of the library is to expose youth to other experiences and possibilities through books, showing them that there is more to life than what they are doing, and that there is a future beyond the juvenile hall. This work is critical as 85% of youth in in the juvenile justice system, excuse me, have difficulty reading, and for young people in custody, literacy skills are strongly connected with reducing recidivism. Another essential program and service that prison libraries offer is developing job skills and workforce capabilities. A key to successful reentry is finding employment. Prison libraries are vital partners in connecting incarcerated people to learning and work, as well as public libraries on the outside are vital partners in connecting with workforce partners and in order to best know their communities, right? So it's a kind of that multiple front approach to support for both incarcerated people on the inside and then returning citizens once they leave incarceration, to provide that kind of holistic, robust support from prison libraries on the inside, and then also from public libraries on the outside, and working together in that. Prison libraries, like the library at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, provide resources such as reentry computers that allow women to create resumes and search for incarceration-friendly employers, as we know that that's a barrier that many incarcerated people face upon reentry, is access to employment, often facing barriers about there's been several ban the box laws, where the box that you check on like an employment application that you fill out, where it basically says, have you ever been incarcerated, essentially, and that there have been some laws. We have seen actually some bipartisan support for laws at the federal level and the state level to ban kind of those boxes. And to allow more equitable hiring practices to account for people's lived experiences. But what is incredible about this example out of the Ohio Reformatory for Women is that it allows for a tailored version of Ohio Means Jobs, so that after release, when women can access, the women that were incarcerated in the facility can access the same website live, right? Another barrier that I'll get into in a second is that often there's no internet access inside prisons. And so that's a huge technological and digital skills barrier that we'll talk about in a little bit, but that women can work on the inside on these resumes and then access that same website live on the outside. So there's not some user friendly issues, right? To continue their job search. So they know the system, they're familiar with the system on the inside, and then it's also the same system on the outside. So that work translates over, which is often another barrier, because sometimes that's another technological skill or technological interface to have to learn. Similarly, libraries help incarcerated people conduct research relevant to their own businesses upon release and support entrepreneurship. Libraries play a central role in helping people learn how to use technologies and integrate them into their work and personal lives. Expanding access to technologies in prisons would help reduce the economic impact of recidivism by enabling incarcerated individuals to begin the process of reintegrating into the workforce by building digital skills relevant to a wide range of professions. Many people lack these skills due to literacy barriers or to the fact that technology has evolved significantly during their time of incarceration. I think, just speaking for myself, technology has evolved so rapidly, just generally, right, day to day, right, with the introduction of AI, so much, right, is evolving rapidly currently. And to kind of put that in context, if someone has been incarcerated for decades, to come out, the technology has just changed completely rapidly. And there's, I think, often here some examples of concern from returning citizens around like using self-checkout, or concerns about violating parole because they don't know how to understand the new technology, and that could they accidentally, right, not know how to use technology and it cause potentially a problem down the line. So really important to kind of build that technological, the skill building as well. Research points to the importance of ensuring that incarcerated people have the possibility to develop digital skills, including those relevant to employment and job seeking to success for reentry. For a population without access to the internet, libraries are a fundamental link to information about the jobs market and the business environment. Information is key to success on the outside. Research demonstrates incarcerated people who are taught valuable skills and have a job during the time of incarceration are 24% less likely to recidivate. So looking a little bit more at some additional kind of essential programs that are offered, prison libraries also maintain family connections during incarceration. Prison libraries connect people through family literacy programs and help them maintain existing connections through shared culture, literature, and art. The Read to the Children program, for one, is available at all Colorado Department of Correction libraries. This program allows incarcerated people to read a book and record a video to send to a young family member. This can include children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, or siblings. Library family literacy programs like this are a meaningful way for incarcerated people to have presence in their children's lives. Additional kind of support programs include mental well-being and human dignity, providing reentry information and resources, which again, like I mentioned previously, works in tandem with public libraries on the outside to provide, right? Sometimes there's partnerships with public libraries and prison libraries provide library cards. I think many of you might be familiar or may even operate those programs as well. So despite all of these incredible programs and the support that prison libraries offer to incarcerated people and their families, right? I think there's also this incredibly important component to stress is that it's a ripple effect, right? It's not just the person who's incarcerated, it's their families on the outside, it's the communities that they're a part of and the communities that they're returning to. There's wide-ranging impacts and costs, both socially and economically. So despite all of this, there are many challenges that prison libraries face. Prison libraries face inconsistent and inadequate funding, significant gaps in resources and quality, varying widely by location, not just across the country, but varying widely across each state, right? There's a wide layer to the carceral system in the United States. There's an example of a Nebraska prison library that had a materials budget of only $1,000 per year. Additionally, censorship policies that are often arbitrary and unnecessarily restrict access to information. This severely limits the impact and reach, excuse me, and even modest funds invested in carceral libraries have the potential to reach across the country's incarcerated population, changing lives and communities. An analysis of prisoners' information requests at the New York Public Library's Reference by Mail service revealed that incarcerated people's information requests are clustered around three core themes: self-help, reentry information, and general reference queries that typically go unanswered due to the lack of access to the internet and robust general libraries and correctional facilities. If we do not provide people with access to books and information during incarceration, how can we expect people to succeed upon release? In this context, it's clear why both efforts to meet the information needs of incarcerated people are critical and that prison libraries must be better equipped to meet the needs of their patrons. Before I go through the rest, anybody have any questions? Okay, I will keep on going. All right, so next we're going to talk a little bit about kind of some standards and research that's happened around prison libraries. So while many parts of the country lack consistent support for carceral libraries, Colorado and Washington state stand out as examples of states that offer centralized, comprehensive library services to prisons. The key to success in these states is that we have seen is the result of long-term partnerships between state libraries and state departments of corrections. Additionally, these states stand out because they provide dedicated library staff and funding to their prison libraries. And the services that they provide to incarcerated people are designed to replicate services public libraries offer on the outside, often resembling those services provided to small rural libraries. That's often what they're trying to replicate on the inside for prison libraries. And in terms of talking a little bit more about standards and research, part of what we call for in the paper is additional research around prison libraries. There's been incredible strides made, but additional research and additional support to connect the work that prison libraries do to reduced costs of incarceration and to reduce recidivism rates, to further demonstrate to policymakers why this matters and why prison libraries are a worthwhile investment. And so some of those standards and research, there's been multiple efforts taken by the library field to support prison libraries' work. And some of those efforts include the Expanding Information Access for Incarcerated People initiative, which is out of the San Francisco Public Library, and it was also had some support from ALA, was made possible by support from the Mellon Foundation, which aimed to identify existing library services for incarcerated people, supporting professionals in the field to build out or create new services, developing digital literacy programs. A really incredible initiative. I would encourage folks to check out their website if you haven't. We have a really incredible mapping tool where they're mapping um, public libraries and libraries that provide services to incarcerated people, as well as book donation programs. It's a really incredible resource, and I can drop that link in the chat at the end as well. Some additional areas have been the new ALA standards for the library services for the incarcerated or detained were published in 2024. They represent a very long overdue update, as the last time that the standards were updated was 1982. So yeah, very, very long time. So, and the hope is, I think, to continue to update that much more regularly than was, because from 1992 to 2024 is a really, really long trajectory. So really excited to have those. And there's a digital copy to those as well that has great resources. They have like at a glance kind of services and standards, and then kind of more really in-depth, meaty, in the weeds information if you really want to get into that. And they have great sections about called Where It Worked, which like very practical examples of where the standards were worked in practical everyday examples within prison libraries or juvenile justice systems across the United States and in Canada, I believe. Really great, and would encourage folks to look at that as a resource as well. Um, but with all of that, this is actually a quote that is from somebody at the Washington State Library that talks about the average rate of registered users in the prison branches of the institutional library service, in their institutional library service is about 80%. Our branches are used a lot. It is easy to undervalue libraries or completely overlook their importance, but their absence is always felt. And I feel like this quote really demonstrates the importance of services on the inside, that books, often incarcerated people talk about books being lifelines, right? For that time while they're incarcerated, opening up their world to different possibilities or different experiences, or even reflecting their own experience that maybe they haven't seen documented on pages before. And the quote really gets to the heart of all of the important work that prison libraries do and the funding that they definitely need. So thinking a little bit more about kind of practical tips and policy recommendations. So at the end of the paper, we call for policy and philanthropic support to expand and fund prison libraries as an effective, high-impact approach to improving lives and reducing taxpayer costs. Everyone benefits when people who have been incarcerated are best equipped to return, find gainful employment, and rebuild familial connections. So to unlock the potential of prison libraries, policymakers, those in carceral professions, and philanthropists can take some key steps that I'll get into in a second. But before we, and one of those key steps is to fund prison libraries through support by supporting federal level prison library investments, such as the Prison Libraries Act, which I will touch on in a second, to ensure collections, staffings, and facilities meet modern standards. So our office worked with Representative Emanuel Cleaver II, who is out of the 5th District in Missouri, um, on the Prison Libraries Act. It was also co-led by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and Representative Chantel Brown. and it was introduced in 2023, so several several years ago, and unfortunately it didn't pass. But the legislation was the first ever congressional bill on prison libraries. So so it really demonstrates that there is a interest at the congressional level to provide support to the work of prison libraries, which is really incredible. If the act had passed, it would have established a competitive grant program within the Department of Justice to provide library services to incarcerated individuals to advance reintegration efforts, reduce recidivism, and increase educational opportunities. The legislation is an important first step towards providing much needed financial support to prison libraries. And so the hope is to write that this is like a great building block, a great foundation to improve upon potential funding opportunities for prison libraries that's so desperately needed to provide that additional support. And with that legislation, actually, which was the Representative Cleaver's office wanted the legislation to, the legislation would only be applicable to, if it had passed, to state prisons. But the whole design and the whole reason that they were very interested in drafting this legislation was they wanted it to be for prison libraries that either didn't have a library at all, or that had very inadequate facilities so that they could be able to build the library from the ground up. And so they were really interested in providing that support throughout for program opportunities. Grants could cover a wide variety of support for all of those kind of programs I mentioned earlier, but additional opportunities as well. And so yeah, looking at that as kind of a foundational piece for future work. Additional action agenda items and kind of like action steps would be to encourage expanded philanthropic support. So urging philanthropic entities to fund efforts that promote awareness and understanding of the role prison libraries play, including the development of a framework for systematic data collection about prison libraries. So another key piece is that data gathering. Um, to demonstrate, since that's another challenge, is there's a lack of data around prison libraries. So in terms of like kept at the federal level, or kind of sort of like data that you can regularly access around prison libraries and the program offerings, to be able to connect that to reduced costs. Um, and then that second one, investing in research and data to collect and publish robust data on prison library use outcomes and impacts on recidivism, is why looking for more of that data. To support adopting national standards, so implementing the library services standards, or library services to the incarcerated and detained, excuse me, standards for library services to the incarcerated and detained, for consistent high quality library services in all correctional facilities. So there is a model to follow in the standards. And then supporting professional staffing to ensure that every prison library has trained library staff and library workers. And then raising public awareness to highlight the proven benefits of prison libraries in reducing recidivism and promoting safer communities. By working together, policymakers, philanthropists, and those in carceral professions can support prison libraries as powerful engines of rehabilitation and reentry, helping individuals succeed and making society safer for all. Every dollar for prison education pays for itself. And reduced incarceration. And we have the potential to reap meaningful economic and social returns by prioritizing learning through prison libraries. Conversely, neglecting prison libraries means squandering human potential and taxpayer dollars. Providing professional library services to incarcerated individuals ensures that people are equipped with essential support and skill building for future employment and educational goals. And with that, um, I'm yeah, that is at the end of it. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. I have questions maybe for you guys as well, if there are any other questions from the audience. But thanks so much for your time to chat a little bit more about prison libraries. And I'll drop a link to the paper and that other resources that I had mentioned throughout.
Thank you, Emily. Do you all have any questions? Or would anybody like to share what they're doing if they are able to partner with correctional facilities, resources that you use in your library to support those who are reentering society. I also wrote down about digital skills, and how you are potentially, or what resources you're using to help, maybe not just those who are reentering, but uh, others in your community who need digital literacy skills. And I
Well, I'm
think
just,
you're okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to chime in and say Maryland prisons are not so great.
Mm,
So we also, the budget for Maryland prisons is $1,000 a year, which is, that's not humane.
yeah.
I also want to mention that the underlying problem, from my point of view, is that people, people who administer prisons, people who think about prisons, don't consider just going to prison part of the punishment. They also, I believe, consider depriving people in prison of things like books or access to the internet. It's like further punishment piled on top of their incarceration. Um, so one of the things that we're doing in Maryland that sort of is in our control, we had legislation passed last year called Promoting Family Literacy in Prison Libraries. And we're piloting a program to have incarcerated individuals read to a family member, record that, and then the book and the recording gets sent home to the family member. I want the pilot to be substantial. I want it to focus on a few people over a longer period of time rather than just trying to serve as many people as possible. So it's a 3-year pilot. Our agency is administering it. We're responsible for the report. And the hardest part of that whole legislation thing is the cooperation between our state agency.
Hmm.
The Department of Labor is in charge of the prison librarians.
Hmm.
And then the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, those are the prison people. So it's kind of an unprecedented state partnership that we're hammering away at. The other pieces that are just as equally as important, funding for the prison libraries. It's just not there. And it's very unfortunate, which is why I so appreciate ALA's publication last year, because that puts it in print, right? Here are the standards. Here's what your state should be doing. So that's kind of a little check-in from Maryland. Also, just got to say, at our one pre-release facility, there is no internet.
No, no,
So
yeah. Yeah. That's a huge, right? Like the internet's a huge barrier.
yeah,
Um,
and
back.
the guys who work there, and they go out and they work at a fast food restaurant and then they come back, they also have to pay room and board, and they also have to pay for their transportation. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, it's really abysmal. I think there's for lack of a better word, and so much there. But thanks so much for sharing what's happening in Maryland. We're really interested in how your pilot evolves, and really great to see that legislation at the state level,
Yeah.
with um, many challenges happening at the federal level. It's interesting. It's great to see states, stepping into that space as well. Um, and I had a question for you about what you just said, and it completely flew out of my head for a second there. Um, but yeah, it's great to at least to see that. I'd be interested in actually how many libraries you like prison libraries you expect to be in. I know you said you wanted it to be fewer. Um, if you follow fewer people over a longer period of time, which I think is a great metric.
Yeah, our prison people just wanted to tag this program onto like a family visitation day. And we were
Hmm.
like, no, that's not
Yeah.
meaningful.
Yeah.
And a one-time event, how do you assess that?
Yeah.
So I want to make it more meaningful.
No, definitely. Yeah, it's incredibly important. Oh, and that's the other thing I was going to say. I remembered it came back to me. What we were talking about with the standards. That yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like to be able to have the physical copy. And I know that I believe they were at one point. I don't know if they still are. Or that if you requested a copy, that they would send that to you, to be able to get that in the hands of people in correctional facilities, like in carceral facilities, to hand it to. folks who work on the inside, to be able to see this is in writing, this is what, these are the standards, these are the guidelines. So yeah, thanks so much for the feedback on that, and excited to hear how that evolves. Yeah.
Emily, kind of touching on what you just said about the printed document with the standards, if people have, I mean, you've put the link in there. If people I know there's some other state libraries, but then some public libraries are represented too. If people have questions or they want to get those standards into, or they're working with their local correctional facility, can they, how, it would be the best to just download it and print it? Or what would be the best way to facilitate getting it to that's the staff at a correctional facility?
Yeah. I would say probably, I think there's a couple, because there is a downloadable link, which I'll actually, the link I shared, the second link I shared in the chat will take you to kind of our economic opportunity page, which has a bunch of resources about economic opportunity, and it links to other ALA resources. And then that initiative, which out of San Francisco Public Library with the expanding information access as well, I would say. And then there's a link to the standards on that page, I believe, and I can drop it here as well. But there should be a link that will tell you to get that digital link. So there's also like very easy ways if you don't want to print or worry about kind of printing as well, you could link that digital link to folks as well. But there should be a link to the standards page where should be able to contact somebody about that. But if not, if that's unavailable there, I flashed my email really quick, but I will drop it in the chat as well. So feel free to email me and I can connect you to the right people to be able to get you to talk to some of the folks who work directly on the standards. I did not work directly on the standards. That was an initiative out of another ALA office that we work with often. But I can get you to the right people to get you to what you need. So I'll drop, yeah.
Thank you. Something else that's kind of in my brain too, adult education and partnerships, potentially partnerships with local adult education providers. Some of them sometimes are allowed to be in the correctional facilities, but and at least in Kentucky, they, part of it is digital literacy, part of it, I mean, it could be citizenship issues if their persons are not, they're not from this country. But I didn't know if that's something that, and across the country, if your libraries are able to do that, or if how adult education is able to be within the institutions, correctional facilities.
Yeah, I think it varies so widely that like right like in certain facilities, I would say it varies widely, probably from facility to facility, that it's such a challenge, I think, sometimes to get folks inside as well, like, right, like to have that contract to get folks on the inside to do those adult education. But there is, right, we see there's a number of um, adult education spaces or an education around in prison libraries. And so I think that is what's so important, is for that to work in tandem with prison library services as well, because um, and like just general education programs that are in prison libraries as well, that's often a classroom that has a set number of seats. But for the most part, right, like a prison library has the potential to educate like the whole prison population as well. So kind of working, right, that partnership piece of working together and working in tandem as possible, as best as possible. Um, yeah, but I think it just also just really varies across across the state. And I think that's part of a huge challenge, is there's so many layers and there's like such a web to the intricacies and like red tape to a lot of just a lot of barriers across access to within each state, within, across the country, and different, everybody handles it differently. And I think, Mary, what you said in the chat also, to reiterate what you said, is that as a nation, we spend more time into incarcerate adults and to educate children. And I think that's really so true. And a little bit what we were trying to get at with the paper is that, right, like we could be spending this money to increase education, to increase skill building, to help support incarcerated people and their families as they reenter, and like redirect some of that funding to, or include in that funding additional supports and resources for prison libraries.
Any other comments or?
Do you ever get any pushback? And if so, what would that pushback look like? I'm just curious.
When you say, I have a clarifying pushback question. When you say pushback, do you mean pushback like depending on the different types of groups, or like do you mean like, yeah, what kind, could you expand a little bit more on like what you mean by pushback?
Do you get, I assume that you present to many different types of groups?
Hmm.
Are there people who aren't maybe on the team library side who represent, who have other points of view?
Yeah, of course. I think for sure, definitely. I mean, that's a great question. Part of why I asked for a little bit clarification is because I think that part of with the paper and prison libraries in general, it's a broad coalition, right? Like in order to like think about funding at the federal level, it's a broad coalition of folks. And like I listed, right, like our like some of the folks in our audience, right, like the library community, philanthropists, those in the carceral profession, and really policymakers. The paper was written, and this work is um, directed in a bipartisan manner, and so I often think that sometimes we do like, yeah, the paper was directly written with a bipartisan lens to appeal to folks on both sides of the aisle in order to, um, you know, um, get that funding, right? Like to think about the funding and think about it, right? Because incarceration it cuts across party lines, right? In so many different ways. And there's a section within the paper specifically that talks about bipartisan investments and some legislation that has happened recently, even, which is in this day and age is sort of unique, to say the least, that has happened around prison policy reform from folks across the aisle. So I would say in terms of pushback, um, sometimes I think more often than not, at least it's often like an education piece of like trying to get folks to understand or even know about the work of prison libraries. So it's a little bit more of that, but of course do get some pushback and would be along the lines of but not resounding pushback, I would say, but a little bit along the lines of just why put funding towards that kind of thing or that way. But I think there is a unique spot with libraries, right? That we're talking about support for libraries as well. So yeah, it's a great question. Thanks.
Did you
I'll share.
have any like favorite examples from libraries out in the field from the report or anything like that? Anything that stuck out especially special from that report?
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, I think, gosh, there was I think there was like so many things that I like love. I felt like were really just special out of the report that it's hard to say. But I think that I'm blanking on the specific example of the library, so I will feel like I will look it up in a second if I can. But there's a well, to provide a little bit more context, the paper, we tried to focus it particularly on prisons, but we pulled from other examples of like juvenile justice facilities, touched briefly on detention facilities, but that was because of the way the legislation was written, thinking about that kind of advocacy piece. But there's really incredible programs with music in juvenile justice facilities that were that example to me was just very incredible that I really enjoyed. And I will try to see if I can find it really quick to make sure I'm um, accurately representing it. Oh, yeah. So it's the library at the Donald E. Long Juvenile Detention Center in Oregon. They did music production workshops to help youth develop their writing skills and process difficult emotions to tell their stories and express their hopes and dreams. And I just think that that's an incredible example and an incredible program of like, right, music is such like a unit, it's a unifying thing and a universal thing. And but like to use that to develop your writing skills is such a unique way to approach literacy. I actually have a question for everybody here really quick, if that's okay. Um, are there certain kind of services that you would like to offer to support returning citizens or incarcerated people in your libraries that you're currently not? Or is there certain do you have certain hopes to do that? Be interested in learning more if you did.
I can share. So I'm at the state library. We have connected, or have a collaboration with our Department of Adult Education.
Hmm.
And they have specifically a reentry coordinator who works with, at the state level, but with local adult education providers. And they do something called targeted orientation sessions.
Hmm.
And they are starting to open that up into libraries. So the library would be the meeting space, but library staff could present on Learning Express Library Database, for example. And these are for persons who are reentering can come to these, but then other community organizations can present. Maybe there's somebody there to present about SNAP or Goodwill Opportunity Center or those different. And so I, I would like to see that develop because it's going to help with partnerships, but it's also going to connect the library to lifelong learning. And those
Hmm.
individuals can come in. Oh, they have story time. Oh, they have computer classes. Oh, these are resources that I can bring my kids to. I can come, and so that's a hope for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think those kind of it sounds similar to what you're describing of like the resource fair, right? Of like where you can for specifically for returning citizens, where you can see kind of all of the different touch points in the way that the library kind of brings all those services together for folks. It's really wonderful and definitely needs more support at that level as well too, right? Not just, for prison libraries, but
So one of the things we're doing in Maryland, and it's kind of a trend that I've noticed, is public libraries reaching out to their local jails and detention centers.
Mhm.
Um, and this is good, I'm starting to see a pattern where the library starts by giving the jail or detention center just their weeded books.
Mhm.
But over time, they kind of build a relationship that gets their foot in the door, maybe to have programming, to have a more substantial relationship with the jail or detention center. And the reason they're targeting those as opposed to prisons, the prisons are
Mhm.
just incredibly locked down, super
Yeah.
secure. Detention centers and jails, it's smaller population and it's generally more lax security. So it's easier for libraries and librarians to get a foot in the door that way. And they're really trying to encourage people to, hey, visit your library when you get out. We'll give you a library card. We'll help you find a job, etc. It's kind of a natural relationship.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it really helps to build those county relationships for the public libraries at the local level.
Yeah, and that relationship building is so important, right? Across it's so incredibly important, especially I think in these times to have those robust relationships
Yeah.
to work together. So it's really, really incredible. We have another paper that's several years older that is about public libraries. It focuses a little bit more on public libraries and talks a little bit about how other states are doing that as well. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing.
We've got a few more minutes. Just a reminder, I don't think I said this earlier, the date, but our next meeting is on December 9th. And that will be, let's see, get the information here. Job Resource Connections, ongoing support for job seekers. And this is with Kristen Linscott and Heather Torres from the Plano Public Library. And Emily, thank you so much. I don't, if you please ask if anybody else has got questions or anything. Didn't mean to shut us down. It's just
Oh
more.
no, it's totally good. Yeah, I know I ended a little bit early, I know, with my presentation. So happy to answer any other questions, or and happy to stay around and chat with folks. And like I said, I dropped my email in the chat. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Or if I'm not the best person to answer them, I will make sure I can connect you to the right people to get you the answers that you need. But would always be interested in learning about, your library services and how they evolve, and how you support people who are returning citizens, or your work with prison libraries and supporting incarcerated people. So yeah, happy to stay around and answer any other questions that folks have as well.
Do any of your libraries circulate materials to incarcerated or the persons who are incarcerated from like your state library? And Mary, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were going to say something.
Yeah, we don't circulate anything. We have, I believe, 14 prisons in Maryland that each have their own libraries and their own librarian. They don't have interlibrary loans, so what they have in the library is what they get.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I asked because we have one of our correctional facilities um, borrows book kits from the state library, and they will do book discussions with their persons.
That's great.
So, but
Yeah, that's really cool.
the librarian at the facility has to come to they're close, so it's not a burden. I mean, I'm sure it is somewhat of a burden for her to travel, but it wouldn't be a huge drive. But she comes and gets the kits from us, and so,
We also don't have a state library, so we're a little different. We actually kind of I don't know what you call that. Our state library system is a part of the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which is the sort of the mothership for Baltimore, and they serve as the state library. So we don't really lend stuff.
gotcha. Thank you. It's so neat how different. I mean, we're each state's different, and just like each library system is different.
Yeah, and each prison, each detention center, each jail, they're all different too. It's a lot.
Yes.
A lot of layers to all of it for sure.
Mhm.
A lot to navigate. Yeah, for sure.
But I do want to say, like, I worked in West Virginia as a librarian in prison, and one of the things that was super helpful there was the incarcerated individuals there had filed a lawsuit
Mm.
maybe 20 years ago, and a state judge ruled on it, and he gave very specific instructions to West Virginia about how many hours it would be open a week, how much money it would allocate for the library, how many hours each person got to spend in the library every week. Super duper helpful. And Maryland has no such, uh, nothing like that.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. I was not familiar with that out of West Virginia. So that's really, really interesting. Yeah, how everybody deals with it differently, right? And like in that, helpful in that way of like providing kind of that background information right there that, mandates aspects for folks specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another kind of aspect with all this, right, with like some of the examples I shared earlier of like that Colorado and Washington are sort of seen as models, I think, across for their prison library services that they offer within. I think another piece that's so important is that there's a like right they were well funded, but also some of that they're also facing funding challenges as well because of what's happening at the federal level with IMLS. So right, that the need for funding is even greater than it was previously. So there's just a lot of layers for sure.
Emily, thank you so much for presenting
of course.
today,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Mary, and thank you, Saw, for facilitating, organizing, keeping us recording and everything. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Happy to be here and chat with folks. And like I said, happy to answer any questions and connect more about the work that you guys are doing as well. Sounds like great things happening in Kentucky and Maryland as well. But yeah, thank you so much. I think, yeah, we can